Now, if you want to simplify your rig, you may have clicked on the right thumbnail. I personally love keeping my gear as minimal and simple to use as possible, so I spend less time tweaking knobs and settings and more time actually recording the tracks I need to get done. Now, I have 3 tips I like to use to keep my boards as minimal and compact as possible, and I'm going to try and use those tips to try and sift through all these pedals back here and make something that will hopefully fit on this Pedal Train Nano Plus here. Let's see how that turns out. Tip number 1. Spend some time and think about what you actually use your pedals for. Specifically like your always on pedals. For me, those tend to be a light overdrive being used for a little bit of saturation, maybe a little bit of mid boosting, compressor pedal, and like a subtle reverb. And a lot of the functionality of what those pedals are doing can be substituted by just spending some time with my amp and tweaking some settings, using the amp reverb. Compression pedals you realistically don't need unless you're playing bass or doing some funk tracks. But like a lot of those things can be substituted by probably the engineer throwing reverb on your track afterwards or putting compression on your track afterwards. So just spend a little time and think if you really need those pedals. They're realistically just occupying space that could be used by a pedal with a bit more flavor or a bit more utility. So I'm going to go ahead and take the pedals off this pile that I think kind of fit into that bucket that I don't really need. So tip number 2 would be to use pedals with a lot of utility. And that might sound pretty obvious, but there's a handful of pedals that you might be surprised can do multiple things. Like vintage fuzzes clean up very, very nicely into a vintage style overdrive, and even distortions like the Rat, you can turn the filter all the way up and get a really, really nice fuzz tone with them. But obviously you're also going to want to use multi-effects units like your hologram chroma console or your JHS color box preamps with the really nice 3-band EQ and the DI out. So things that kind of fill a lot of roles you're going to obviously want to throw on this pedal board where you can. Tip 3, and this is you're going to have to make some sacrifices. You're going to have to potentially kill some babies here, and that is try and keep one type of pedal for every kind of flavor on your board. You're likely only going to be able to fit one type of modulation. You're not going to get a chorus, a univibe, a reverb, a delay on there. You're not going to have like 5 different gain stages and 3 different overdrive pedals. You're going to need to make some sacrifices. You're going to have a little bit less fun with your board than you would probably hope for. And just try and keep the clutter down as much as you can. Alright, so here's kind of the final product I ended up with. I guess I'll just explain in pedal order what we have going on. First up, I got the Earthquaker Devices Park. It's a tone bender vintage fuzz style pedal. So I put it in before the buffer from this TU3 here. And what's so great about these tone bender style pedals is they clean up very, very well with your dynamics about how hard you're picking. Just if you're attacking more, it gets really, really gritty. So this kind of works as both a fuzz and an overdrive. And then I have the Boss TU3, just probably controversial choice to put on a compact board, a tuner pedal, but it really just makes tuning so much faster and reliable when you're not using like a tuning app or a clip-on tuner that will easily get lost in a dirty basement you might be recording in. I know from experience. For my modulation, JHS Unicorn, it does a really good wet and dry, so you can get kind of a clean tremolo chorus kind of sound or your traditional univibe sound. So this is a good utility modulation pedal in my opinion as well. And then for more modern alternative rock 90s distortion pedal, I got Boss DS2 Classic. Just kind of fills the void of having a more modern aggressive distortion on this board. And then JHS Color Box. This thing is fucking amazing. It's got a DI out, which is super helpful, or if you want to mic up an amp and if you're not satisfied with the tone, you have a good clean DI signal to use as well. It has a 3-band EQ, which is super useful. And just kind of this knob here, you can get 3 different like steps of distortion and overdrive out of it. It's just a very, very wonderful utility pedal. It's Probably the best pedal I've ever bought. Now, before we go ahead and demo what this pedal board sounds like, if you found any of this helpful, I would really appreciate a like on the video. If you found these tips to be terrible and useless and you got some better suggestions, please leave them in the comments as well. And thanks for watching.